Hi, everybody, and welcome to week 13, reading and writing and the applications of everything that we've learned about language into these different modes of communication. We've been talking about spoken language up to this point, and now we're going to take a look at what happens when language is in written form. So this week's lecture is a little bit shorter, but it is the tail end of the chapter. And so we're just going to kind of get the last bits done in this particular chapter before we move forward. The written word, let's think about that. Why do you think the written word develops more slowly than oral language? So in other words, why is it that children learn to write later than they learn to speak? Why aren't those simultaneous? I'll let you think about that for just a minute. Well, think about, motor skills do come first. So we sit up, crawl, roll over, grab things, hold on, even stand sometimes before we start talking. So motor skills certainly come sooner. However, the fine motor skills that are required to hold a pencil, to copy a line, to make a line the same as someone else's in the form of a grapheme like the letter A or the letter C, takes fine motor control, visual perceptual skills, the ability to look at something and copy an image. That takes not only cognitive development, but also fine motor development. And at the young age of 1, 2, 3 years old, children are not yet able to do those tasks to the degree that they would need in order to write. It is another form of language. So on top of learning the phonemes of language, now they have to learn something else. So while they have coordinated the steps of the speech machine and they are able to articulate and make the sounds of their native language, they then have to learn a next step. And the next step is that those sounds have graphic representations, and the graphic representation are graphemes that we call letters. And then they have to make the understanding that those letters combine to make things we call words. So again, cognitive development needs to happen first, as does motor skill development, before the written word can become a tool that a child can use. What we do know about the written word is that reading success and written language proficiency is entirely dependent or most connected to the home environment. If the home has literature, exposure to literature, values literature, young children see adults reading for pleasure, reading for meaning, valuing the written word, that's when the child too will place value on the written word through reading and through exposure and valuing literacy and literacy skills. The general rule of thumb is to have a good reader, they need to be read too often, they need to be read too early, and then they will in turn be an early reader. Phonemic awareness is a precursor to reading. Phonemic awareness is the ability to understand and see differences in phonemes. So there are pieces of phonemic awareness that are directly related to reading, and then there are some non-phonemic awareness capacities that are not necessarily directly related to reading. But phonemic awareness itself is a pre-reading skill. So segmentation and blending are two skills. So segmentation is where you take a word like cat and you break it into its parts. Cat. Blending is when you take at and you slide them back together and you create cat. So segmentation is the pulling apart of the word, like defining all the words in the word star. Determining all the words in the word stand, and then blending is when you're putting them together. Blend all the sounds that I'm saying. Ch, a, s, d, chased. Initial sound and final sound identification is being able to say, okay, this word starts with a B. The word is bat. Find other words that start with B. The words are dog, baby, bang, and top. Which ones start with the same sound as bat? And the same goes for final sound identification. Deletion or elision or omission is where I take a word and I'll ask you to leave a part out. So I'll say hot dog. Now say hot dog, don't say dog. We make it a little more complicated. Say hot, don't say t. Say hot, don't say h. And it gets a little more complicated. Say flag, don't say f. It'll be lag. Say star, don't say t. Sar. So deletion can be quite complicated. If I say the word helicopter, don't say ul. Helicopter. So it takes a little bit of thinking in order to be able to manipulate the sounds and words visually and auditorily in order to say them and use the process of deletion. Syllabication is a non-phonemic piece where we break out syllables. That and rhyming don't have a direct connection to reading skills, but they are a piece of building blocks, sort of a precursor to when a child will be reading or writing. There are 3 stages of reading. The stages are described in great detail in the literature, the book that you are reading in class, and I expect it for your essay this week for you to use the information from the text, not just to repeat the information on these slides. These slides are just cursory to tell you a little bit about these 3 stages of development. The information in the textbook is much more concrete, much more complete, and that's what I expect your answers for this week's essay question to contain. If you use just the information from the slide, you will lose points, okay? So emergent readers are those little ones who, pick up their favorite book and they pretend to read. They want to read their favorite book to you. They make up the story as they go along. They're familiar enough with the story and with the pictures that they hold the storyline fairly well. They have some word identification, so they can find some words on the page and they can even spot words in their community. They'll see signs that they recognize that look familiar to them. And this usually happens between the ages of 3 and 4 years old. The developing reader is the reader, kindergarten, first, second grade, where they read for meaning. So they are not just sound blending anymore. They do use decoding skills, but they also use context clues to determine what the meaning is. They'll use pictures in their story to help them determine the meaning. They use books to expand their understanding of topics. So the teacher might say, okay, we're going to learn about firemen, and then they might read a paragraph on firemen and learn things about the firemen from the reading. An independent reader is that one, the child that sits or stands with mom in the post office line and they have their little nose in a book and they're oblivious to the line and they're just entranced into the literature. That's that independent reader. They read on their own. They're the lover of Captain Underpants, or they're the lover of Goosebumps or the Harry Potter tales. They're the ones who enjoy a particular genre or a particular style or an author, and they pay very little attention to the print and they focus strictly on content. The independent readers will increase their own difficulty and challenge themselves in terms of style and form. So, we've come to the end of what happens in the school age years, but that is not the end of what happens with our language. Language continues to grow well into the adult years. In fact, it can continue to grow right through your lifetime. Just think about, when you got a new job, how just having that new job changed your vocabulary. Going to a restaurant, if any of you have ever been waitresses, and you learned that if an item was 86th, it meant that the item was out. You no longer were able to serve that item for the evening. The word Policy might be something if you wrote insurance. If you work in the public schools, IEP might be something that has come into your vocabulary. So where you work definitely impacts your vocabulary and the topics you learn, how to manage language, how to use language. The workplace, but also advanced education. So here you are taking a course, and certainly there have been vocabulary words that you have acquired just by taking this class, and any other classes that you may be taking. Your own personal life experiences, where you travel, your hobbies, your interests. I was just speaking with someone in our class who is an Ironman athlete. And so that vocabulary of that hobby is very specific. Knowing a triathlon, the training that you do for that. I myself have run a marathon, and I run half marathons, and just knowing the terminology is specific to that hobby or life experience. So our vocabularies and our language continues to grow throughout our lifetime. There are some cognitive factors that will impact learning. As we age, there are things that happen to our ability to process information. It is not typical for us to go through dementia or Alzheimer's or to lose our memory. Those are not typical aging issues. What are typical aging issues are a slowing of our processing speed. So you telling me how to work a computer, or telling my 86-year-old mother how to work her computer, or my brother's going to go install an Echo for her, an Echo Dot, and trying to teach her how to use that is overwhelming. Why? Because her processing speed is slower than it was when she was younger. So you have to go more slowly, present information at a pace that they can take it in. Inhibition, we've all stood in a line to check out, or at the post office or at the bank, standing next to an older person, and they start sharing a lot of information with us without any hesitation. Or you ask an older person, and again in a restaurant, how's your day? And they're likely to say, it was awful, you won't believe what happened, and they'll go again and tell you about their day. That's because they lack inhibition. They don't have that filter any longer to shut out the irrelevant details or to ignore when they shouldn't share that information. Working memory is the capacity to store information quickly and act on it. So it is not short-term memory, in other words, the things you know that happen today, nor is it long-term memory, the things that happened many years ago. Working memory is, I'm giving you a phone number, write it down. I'm giving you a phone number, call that number. You made a quick grocery list, you're running into the store to grab those few things. What was there? That's your working memory. So that also decreases as a person ages and does not work as well as it did in our younger years. But the good news is, what we do know about learning is that if our brains continue to learn new things, you learn a new language, you want to learn Romanian or Mandarin Chinese, or a new hobby like basket weaving, or playing a new game, bridge or canasta. Those skills actually create new neurons in your brain and new synapses, and actually prolong your brain's health. Flexibility as we get older, it will help our brains learn and adapt. So those are the normal occurrences of aging. What is not normal is aphasia, dementia, senility, Alzheimer's. Those are not normal impacts of aging. Aphasia is a neurologically based language impairment. It results because there's been damage to the brain, typically through a stroke, cardiovascular accident. It can happen because of a brain injury like TBI, traumatic brain injury. When there is a traumatic brain injury, parts of the brain are damaged and no longer work as they used to. So aphasia can come in many forms. Broca's aphasia is the patient can understand but does not speak. In fact, they often speak just in single words, or they'll nod, or they will speak very telegraphically. Wernicke's or Wernicke's aphasia is they don't understand, but they actually can speak. So they tend to not understand what you're telling them regarding their condition, but they can speak relatively well. Conduction aphasia, they have difficulty repeating information. And anomic aphasia, they can speak and understand, but they lose nouns, people, places, things, names, hence the term anomic. And global aphasia is rather catastrophic and usually impairs both understanding and expression, and the person is not the person they were prior to the incident. It can be devastating. And again, as we said earlier, that dementia is not a normal process of aging, and it's actually dementia is a deterioration of your cognitive function, a deterioration of the brain, such that the brain no longer works well. All right, that's the close of this evening's lecture. I look forward to seeing you in class next week. Have a good night.